Sorry, I was just at the after party with Chris.
Or the breakfast after with him.
How many rumours does Joe just start? All right.
Hello.
Cool.
Is my microphone working? Yes, great. I'm very sorry for the delay. The people who were in on time obviously had workshops that finished promptly, but I'm afraid one of the workshops ran over. So we are starting slightly late, but we will try and still finish up on time because we are now between you and the next instalment of Caffeine. So we will try and race through this. So I'm Charlie Pickles. I am the director at Restate, which is a think tank. Our tagline is bold ideas to remake the state. And we have a big program within our work, which is called Reimagining the Local State, which you can guess what is about. And that is led by...
Me, Simon Kay. Is my mic on? I can tell it is already. I'm running, yes, the program called Reimagining the Local State, where what we try to do is sort of ask and attempt to answer what I consider to be the unasked questions about local government policy, devolution policy, and everything that revolves around the nature of local institutions.
So, today we are doing a session on economic growth, the art of the possible, which might seem a bit of a challenging title at the moment, particularly having us just sat through the last workshop on reorganisation and just how challenging and time-consuming and resource-intensive and lots of other somewhat negative words that we heard. But we're going to park that for a moment. We understand there's huge amounts of uncertainty. We understand that it's a really, really challenging time for everyone in the room. But we also understand that actually the need for economic growth is not uncertain. I think we're all very clear about the challenges that the country is facing, whether that's looking at the productivity levels and the fact that we're a laggard compared to many countries, whether it's the latest GDP growth data, which I think would be generous to say it was underwhelming, or whether it's looking at economic inactivity or now hitting 5% unemployment, or young people and the numbers that are out neat. We have an absolute urgent need to drive growth. But I'm sure everybody in this room would agree that growth doesn't come from Westminster or Whitehall. It doesn't come from theories or great, lovely plans, you know, whether that's a modern industrial strategy or it's an infrastructure plan or it's a white paper to deliver something. Because actually growth comes from local places. It comes from all of you in this room having an idea about what you think is the strategy and the plan at a local level for driving growth. And that's what we want to focus on today. We want to focus on not the big, huge reorganisation challenge, though we appreciate we're talking about it within that context. We want to focus on how, as county councils, you can play a huge, a cornerstone role in driving growth in your local areas, because that's where it's going to come from. And we figured, because we're kind of, you know, we're in that slightly no man's land session between you've done lunch, sort of all feeling kind of nice and full, maybe a bit of an energy rise straight after lunch, you've done your workshops, and now you're in the slump, right? You're all feeling a bit tired, and as I say, we're in between the next injection of caffeine. So we thought we'd make this interactive. There we go. So we are going to have some polls that we want you to not overthink. We want to do them as a bit of a kind of rapid fire. So if you could take that. I believe this is also on the app, I think, is the
They were very
little
clear.
code.
They wanted us to say it's on the app. You've all downloaded the app.
Exactly.
You all love the app, and therefore you should open the app and find the link there.
And so Simon's going to take you through our first quick fire round of poll questions. If you could make sure, are people in it? Have you got it?
Has everyone got it?
Everyone's
Slido,
got, yeah?
opens the browser.
Yeah? So it's slido.com. Do we?
Yeah,
there we go.
scan
if you can take scan of this, it should open it up for you. Yeah? Okay, I can see enough people with thumbs up. So, Simon, do you want to take us through the first section?
Yeah, okay, so Simon, what kind of questions are you going to be putting to the CCN audience? The answer is cheeky questions. We think they might be quite important questions, but they are unquestionably cheeky questions. Could we have a look, perhaps, at the first of those Slido questions? Now, I know everyone in this room will have a piece of paper somewhere, or a booklet, or a large website which says economic strategy,
slides.
or a set of slides.
Yeah.
But the reality is that economic growth comes from difficult choices. And the challenge that I perceive when I look at those strategies quite a lot of the time is that those choices are sometimes sidestepped, they're sometimes ignored. So a couple of the parameters we're about to look at are things like scale. At what scale of operation do we think actual intervention is going to help produce economic growth when you're a county-scale organisation faced with the massive institutional uncertainty that's the context for our gathering here today? Uncertainty over devolution, uncertainty over reorganisation. Do we actually understand whether we need to diversify our economies to achieve growth? Or do we think we can specialise, have a county-wide specialism, and feed more and more energy into that to achieve it? Those are the sorts of questions I want to put. But I wanted to start with the cheekiest question of all. So, does your county actually have an economic strategy? Do you feel like, hand on heart, you know where your growth will come from if our overriding mission is supposed to be achieving that thing? Well, it's very pleasing. Well, hang on, the no's are creeping up as people log in, but it's pleasing to say that more than half of the people in this room do feel that it's clear that we know where growth will come from, that we know where some of those trade-offs need to happen. And that's very helpful because when we turn to the next question, we're going to start asking those questions that sometimes, whether we're a member or an officer, we much prefer to set aside about scale and specialization. So I'm going to go to the next live poll, if I may. So, in your area, is growth going to be about economic specialization, or is it going to be about economic diversification? I heard someone say the magic word of both. And maybe it will be about both. In fact, it almost certainly will be about both. A county-scale institution, a geography that large, there's all sorts of stuff going along. But there's also trade-offs. So gun to your head, if you had to specialize, if you have finite resources, I think everyone here actually has finite resources. If you were going to drive your attention, your resource, your thinking, your strategic know-how, everything, your strategy for commissioning, everything, into one of these different approaches to achieving growth, would it be about diversification or specialization? The case for diversification, I see diversification sort of falling away already here, but the case is that there's a distinctive asset in many places, in some of the sub-regions and the sub-communities, in the very neighborhoods that we live in. You hit too hard on the county-wide specialization button, you might crowd out some of that diversity. That's the risk. I'm sure that's the risk that's being contemplated by some of the people in the 36% there. But then specialization creates that potential for comparative advantage. This is what we are. This is what we plow our attention into. And then there's a virtuous cycle that can emerge from that. In the literature, at least, that's pretty clear from the economics. So it's very interesting to see that we're getting a kind of a 2/3, 1/3 split emerging in favor of specializing, consciously becoming a hub for a given industry or family of industries. Let's move on to the next poll, please. And this, I think, is an even more unfair, cheeky question. What is the actual scale of growth where you are? Does it actually these unitary counties, obviously the group best represented in this room? Do we put all of our cards, and let's face it, this is central government's current strategy on mayoral or other kinds of strategic authorities, both regional, sub-regional, and regional associations trying to exploit growth at that scale? Or in the end, are we really doubling down on that diversification strategy? Do we think that's the basis for healthy and resilient economic growth? That most growth comes from the bottom up? And we need to think about communities enabling particular places to do and to play to their own very particular strengths. Fascinatingly, we have a beautiful three-way split emerging on that question. Now, I'm not completely surprised by that, because it's the same three-way split that affects every aspect of devolution and local government policy. That's kind of setting the temperature, setting the prevailing winds for all of the stuff we're emerging from Whitehall and from local government too. There's a huge drive for neighbourhood scale activity. There's a massive amount of investment going on and time and resources and distraction going on to create this strategic sub-regional layer and the interactions between them. And I bet the people in this room sometimes think that the in-between layer, the county scale, the county unitary scale, sometimes gets a little bit forgotten in those policy terms. They're expected to do quite a lot with not enough. But it's not surprising to me to see that split represented in the questions here today. So moving on now to the next part of the Slido, which is more of a thinker. And because this question is a bit more of a thinker, in a moment I'm going to encourage you to turn, or move to turn, to the person closest to you to have a little bit of a conversation. We're going to give you 8, 9, maybe 10 minutes to have that conversation. Whatever you said in answer to those first 3 questions, and maybe you'll disagree with the person you're talking to, what needs to be true about the model that's going to emerge from all of this uncertainty, all of this instability in your area to enable you to drive growth? Someone still hungry, didn't get their lunch and put sandwiches. Steve J, I'm guessing that's Steve Jarvis. Steve Jarvis loves a sandwich. Oh, is the AI, yeah. All right, so if everyone's ready, cluster up, small groups, pairs, whatever it is, but everyone should be trying to have a conversation with their nearest neighbors on this very simple question. What's the truth statement? What needs to be true about the new model to achieve growth? Thank you.
And just so that you know, we are going to ask you to feed back what needs to be true. So we want some good, robust answers that we can take away from this. Do you want them putting stuff up?
Sorry?
Are they supposed to be putting stuff up?
Yeah.
Yeah. any final thoughts you want to put up on there? So this is thinking about the model of economic growth you chose. So whether you said it was county, sub-county, or at a kind of regional level, what needs to be true for that model of growth to work? Yep.
Thanks, everyone. Wow, that was incredibly difficult to keep up with on my notepad, but a little bit of my old shorthand training came back in, and then I realized I was never good at it, and I stopped. Thank you, everyone. That's really helpful. So what I'm going to do now is maybe talk through what I perceived as some of the headlines from that, setting aside some of the kind of political trolling that kind of made its way somehow into the feed so that we can focus in on some of the policy thinking. And yeah, there's some interesting families of ideas here. I was struck by just how many people are using the word consistent, coherent, joined up. That came up about 7 times minimum from different conversations here. Does someone want to call out what they meant by that? The implication being there's something not coherent about the current situation. What's not coherent? Do current plans build the coherency? Are we on the right track? Anyone who wrote that want to weigh in? Okay, so there's an evidence-based approach that you think is lacking, and I'm thinking there are probably some other people here who are thinking, we've got plenty of evidence, and what we don't have is the drive and the political will, right? Yes, over there.
Our area is unusual because we have a mayoral combined authority, but we've also had a change of party for the mayor 3 times in 9 years, so we have no consistency. So the idea that mayoral combined authorities will provide you with that is not playing out in our area.
Yes, it's interesting, isn't it? Some might think that creating a layer with a mayor, that rhymes, might actually create a little bit more political consistency and predictability, but there are plenty of parts of our system where we're already seeing that political change is a fact, democracies change, people's views shift, and that creates the kind of instability that can be very hard for growth. Is that a fair assessment? Okay, so there's something here about achieving coherency. Is it within the gift of anyone here to create that consistency with the tools they have already? To create coherency? Or do we have to accept as a fact of the current situation, a fact of the landscape?
The gentleman here who said emphatically, I would say yes. Can you explain, or why do you think or what is it that you think gives you already the ability?
As big as certain counties, you have great knowledge of your area. The inconsistency comes, and I'm not attacking, it's just a fact. If you have 2 tiers of local government all doing their own thing, that's inconsistency. As long as you all work together, in essence, we do, then you have consistency. I have to think a mayor, I understand what the change of the party. As long as there's a common theme and a common investment, you can create the consistency. If any mayor comes in and rips that up, unless they think it's going wrong, then that would be very silly. And of course, they will have a combined authority they need to work with as well. So remember, we're all here for one common cause, to improve the lives of people. Lose sight of that, we shouldn't be in office.
So there can be, thank you very much, there can be enough common cause even within the complexity of a 2-tier system, even if your 2-tier system is now a mayoral combined authority with unitaries sitting under it, there can be enough shared vision to create the consistency if everyone accepts those incentives are the right ones. Oh, well, this is working. You prove that it's working, you take that data-led approach that the gentleman was referring to earlier, perhaps, and maybe everyone can agree to keep going with what's working. That's an interesting idea because it means, and it's perhaps a slightly unhelpful thought on my part, to make things work, you need to make things work, and then everyone will see that they're working and the coherency will follow. There were quite a few comments about the situation with workforce, with the risk of brain drain, with the kind of workforce that needs to be constructed. Anyone who weighed in on that, who put that into the feed, does anyone want to elaborate a little bit on what they put? That's a no? Maybe we need a new workforce in this room too. Anyone? Yes?
I just think we need to make sure that we're aligning the education and skills programme with the work that is of the future and which we want to have within our county area, so that we make sure that local people are able to access those jobs.
Okay, now I think there's some good news coming because the idea is that ultimately there'll be some devolution of the skills portfolio under the creation of strategic authorities. I'm seeing some people laughing openly at that idea. Yes.
So I share our skills committee on our dysfunctional sorry, it's really good. It's better than all. The amount of say we have over that skills programme is tiny because we have adult skills, and I think that the main skills funding is 16 to 18 or 19. So far, I don't think anywhere has been devolved that funding.
It's a almost, maybe, sort of, kind of, almost situation. So there's something here about the relationship with Whitehall that might be important to note. That perhaps what's needed is some kind of collective ask, a network of county-scale organisations, perhaps, that can come together and put forward proposals and lobby Whitehall to change the way that it conducts its devolution as all of this change takes place. Is that a wacky idea, or is that something to focus on? And actually, there were a couple of people who weighed in with the idea that what we need is mayoral strategic authorities, empowered mayors, not a foundational strategic authority, but a mayor who could help to crowd in investment, someone who could establish really good terms with iterative devolution deals. They're not supposed to be deals anymore, you know, evolve the strategic authority to take on additional powers over time. Show of hands up if you think your overall quest for growth would be improved by the existence of a mayor in your area. Ooh, that's
I think that's getting on for half.
It's getting on for half.
Yeah.
I think it's a little under
And
half.
keep your hand up if you already have a mayor. Interesting. Okay.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
That's really interesting. Someone who wants to make the case for having a mayor. Does anyone want to brave this slightly hostile crowd? Yes? Government funding. It's
But
the only reason.
is it government funding, or is it also more control over that funding? Does that make a difference? In some of the more mature strategic authorities with mayors, where they have greater control over what they do, is that attractive? Would you feel you could do more? Yes. If it's true. If it's true. Okay, fine.
Yeah, if it's true, for sure. You had your hand up, sir.
Yeah, that's got to be the biggest reason, but it's not the only one. It's also the ability to do things at the right scale, strategic scale, and get rid of conflicts between small competing authorities on a small scale.
Okay. So we begin to iron out the kinds of tensions and conflicts that can emerge when you have a very institutionally fractured system, and you find the right scale for the right kind of economic intervention, which sort of plays off what I was trying to get to with that polling question earlier. Did I see a hand?
Well, as you did, I was going to say on that, if you can invest in the infrastructure to support industry on a wider scale, then that's going to also attract inward investment.
Okay, I think that's a very useful comment. And Kevin?
At the risk of speaking twice, but I will. My question or my statement has always been, if Warren Buffett wants to invest in Essex, who does he ring?
Yeah.
12 district council leaders, 1 county council leader, 2 unitary council leaders. He phones the mayor, and the mayor can make a decision. That's what's happening.
Single point of contact, not only useful for the relationship with the private sector and for corporations, but I think central government likes the idea of having a single point of contact too, and there will be mixed feelings about that perspective. So, say again? Single point of failure. Oh my goodness, single point of failure. I think the tension here comes in with some of the other themes that emerged from the conversation that was playing out on the screen, which was this emphasis that I saw in several of the contributions about local understanding and local knowledge. That fingertip feeling and understanding that can emerge from institutions of a certain size. Now, everyone in this room would be accused by people in district councils and parishes of being too far away from the communities they serve already, wouldn't they, if we're honest? But now we're talking about big economic decisions happening at an even more abstracted scale. Hands up if you were one of the people who wanted to talk about local understanding and local knowledge in that important quest for growth. Anyone? Yes?
What I said was that I think scale is really important, but you also have to respect the fact that there are foundation economies all around the area which need to be supported, and you need to make the place a good place to live. So having good market towns, all the rest of it, in rural parts of the authority is really important.
It's really important, and that, I guess, that sort of lends itself to that idea that you don't necessarily want to over-egg the total county redirect towards a single goal idea. You want everywhere to have its own kind of flourishing and its own kind of sense of place. Very interesting. Well, I'm going to hand over to Charlie in a second, because the reality is that whatever we think and whatever we lobby for, and I really do think that's one of the big things to think about at the end of this session, devolution, at least in theory, is going to play out for all of us. The strategic authorities are coming, foundation strategic authorities or mayoral or established. So what could we get from devolution, however skeptical we are, to enable these quests for growth? Over to you, Charlie.
Okay, I'm going to pick up from there. So we're going to do another sort of quick fire poll. And what we want to get to by the end of this session is exactly what Simon's just said, is a kind of collective, maybe not everybody agrees, kind of total consensus is not really a real thing, but maybe enough people say that actually as a group, and we are here at CCN, as a group we have some asks of government. If we're going to push forward with devolution, if government wants to go ahead with what it's saying at the pace it's saying it wants to do, what are your asks? And can you make some of those asks via a single voice? Because that's going to be the most impactful thing to do. So, can we have the next poll up, please? There we go. So, we want to know, and you can choose a maximum of 2, so don't start hitting buttons yet. Make sure you've read them all. You can pick a maximum of 2 of these. We want to know, can everybody see that? What further powers should devolution deliver to enable you to realise growth in your area? And we've tried to be a little bit provocative in here, so we've got some that maybe are not as typically asked about, like having flexibility over local welfare benefits eligibility, given economic inactivity, unemployment. We all know kind of the rise in disability and sickness benefit dependency. Would that help you in any way? Or some of the more classic, but still yet really used in any meaningful way at all, like fiscal devolution, or some of the more classic ones, like infrastructure, like transport and that kind of thing. So which 2 of these do you think would be the most impactful if future devolution deals gave you those powers to use to drive growth? And we'll just give it a few minutes, unless everybody has been very quick, draw McGraw and done it, but it looks like people are still mulling it over slightly. We do also, and a few people are picking at it, have an other at the bottom there. So if you think there's something really obvious, or something that's not obvious actually, but you think would be tremendously impactful, kind of hoping it isn't hugely obvious, otherwise obviously we've totally missed that. But if you do have an other, anyone who put in other, we're going to ask you to stick up your hand at the end and tell us what your other was, so that we know what the things are in addition to the ones that we've got. All right, people still voting? People done? Give me a nod if you've voted. Yeah? Looks like most people have. Okay then, so perhaps unsurprisingly, given the, and I'm going to hand over to Simon in a second, but I do want to pick up on that other. We've got 3%, which might well just be one person. I don't know what the percentage in terms of the number of votes will be. But unsurprisingly, we've already had a lot of that come through in the previous session around skills, employment support. If you're going to be responsible for a local labour market, shouldn't you sure as hell be responsible for the things that allow you to drive your local labour market? And so that's kind of one of those that always comes up, and obviously transport. But we do have 3% of other. Who put other? Who voted for other? Yes, sir. What was your other?
The other thing is in planning in the sense that at the moment we're very... Thank you. The other in the sense of where we are is the fact that we're a very rural county in nature. About 85% is rural. And a lot of the big infrastructure planning for sort of solar panels, wind, BESS, electrical stuff is done at a borough district level and not at the county level.
Okay.
And these are huge projects. The county should have control of that rather than the borough and district.
Love that. So we want to draw up some stuff as well as draw down
in the big
some
ones.
things.
I mean, we do it
Yeah.
with planning in terms of highways and
Yeah,
big
yeah.
infrastructure stuff. Keep the borough districts doing, you know, local planning, housing, all that kind of stuff. But the big infrastructure things like wind farms, solar
Yeah.
farms, BESS
Where you
should
need
be
more
done
scale.
up the scale.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks so much. Okay, I'm going to hand over to Simon then to go through the next section.
Absolutely. Now, I mean, this is fascinating. And I think the thing I'd like to point to before we open up the PowerPoint slides is this one. There is no one in this room who, with either of their two votes, feels that they have the tools they need already to effect an effective plan for economic growth. Now, I mean, maybe that's not surprising. Maybe it shouldn't be surprising. But there's something a bit stark about that little 0% in the corner there. And I think it's a useful note to take us through into those slides, if it's okay to bring them up now. And I know we have a clicker here. So, given all of that, given the deep institutional uncertainty, what next? Because that's the sort of the essay question here, isn't it? That even though the institutions that everyone in this room is part of are liable to change in the next pretty short period, the communities they serve, the economies they are supposed to help foster, they're not going anywhere, they're not changing. It's the institutions that are on the move. The economies stay the same. The communities are the communities that they are, and the service has to still work for them, even as the institutional change plays out, whether we're happy about it, whether we're skeptical about it. So there's a lot that's shifting that challenge beyond the institutional picture. The finances remain incredibly tight. So the Fair Funding Review and other changes to the financial model, there's plenty of models out there that look at the picture for counties particularly and say, there's a lot of scenarios here where counties, when you take it all into account, lose out in financial terms. Even as the total tonnage of finance going into local government becomes more generous, counties could still be in a position to lose out. And there may be a picture from devolution that helps to correct that. Some might even say that's part of what's going on strategically with devolution as well. Investment, the picture for investment is shifting as well. The 2025 reforms to the Green Book have been pretty significant, actually. And of course, we're still all watching and waiting to see what the long-term implications of those changes might be. But what we know for sure is that they will require a bit of a step change, a change of vibe, a change of approach when it comes to the way that local government, counties, put in their business cases. Think about what the ultimate value of their propositions are when they lobby for further investment. And of course, there's a picture that everyone here is really familiar with and has seen very clearly and has probably talked about a lot already as part of this conference, which is the nature of the demand that they're facing on the services that they provide. This is incredibly relevant to growth, not least because the demand picture shapes the growth profile within a place, and not least because if demand is completely impossible to catch up to, then you don't have sufficient resources within your institution to do economic planning, thinking, and strategy. It denudes the local authority of the ability to participate in economic placemaking and shaping. And so that's a huge part of the picture. And I guess the other thing to say is that there is no world where whatever operational efficiencies you hope for can bridge the gap between where we are now and where demand tells us we need to be in a few years' time. It's an incredibly stark and difficult challenge, and it is not one that has altogether disappeared. And I think I wanted to talk about this fourth item here, the house building pressure specifically. This is the principal lever of economic growth that the current government is attempting to pull. And when I say they're attempting to pull it, they're pushing a kind of a lever that pulls another lever that pulls another lever that makes you guys try and fix the problem when it comes to building. And when I say you guys, I mean it, because counties actually are the more productive end of the local government system when it comes to planning. And because the build, build, build technique isn't quite paying off in other bits of the system, and we're not seeing that uptake. I mean, look at the results in London right now, where building is going backwards. Counties are actually going to be expected to pick up more and more of the slack. And when I say counties, I mean counties and the successor institutions that have a relationship with the same geographies as counties. Oh dear, the director is dying in the corner somewhere. I'm so sorry to hear that. But we'll push on. So the context is incredibly difficult, incredibly stark. And I guess all of the questions we've been asking, all the cheeky polling we've been doing, and all the discussion we've been having in this room has actually been about that bottom bit there. How do you facilitate growth when you don't know your institutional identity from one year to the next, when you don't know what the top tier of the local system will look like, when you're not sure who is going to be making those decisions? We all in this room are used to operating amid some uncertainty. That's the nature of politics, it's the nature of policy. A government changes, the environment changes. The economy changes, the growth strategy changes. But maybe there's a way to be more constructive and to think specifically about the challenge of creating institutional through lines that can survive the councils that set them up, to create the conditions for growth in a way that doesn't really necessarily matter whether that mayoral strategic authority is actually a foundational one, that whether the two council solution comes in or the single county-wide does. So what could that look like? Well, first, I think there's space for a massive lobbying effort right now, and I'm conscious because I'm always impressed and intrigued by the output from the CCN. A network like this is capable of shaping government policy, of holding central government to account, of asking for different permutations on the plans that come in. It doesn't begin and end with the legislative process and amendments to the current bill. There are plenty of opportunities coming up to shift the dial on how central government thinks about the powers that your institutions and their successor institutions will require. So what does it look like to do that, to lobby closely? That's a question that I think people in this room are certainly asking themselves already, but I hope they're not too distracted by the rigmarole of what we've been talking about so far at this conference to do a lot of that. Secondly, I think there's something here about the collaboration between county-scale institutions that's really easily forgotten right now. So all of the change-making that's going on is about, well, do we divide up existing county-scale organizations? Do we glom together existing county-scale organizations into a new strategic authority? Actually, a lot of the real economic business that's going on is between jurisdictions, and sometimes over the borders of jurisdictions of two counties that are represented in this room. So how often are we able to sit down, maybe have to put politics aside to do this from time to time, and say, well, actually, we could both benefit enormously by collaborating over that border, by saying, what's the growth hub between these two bits of our two counties or three counties? So there's a collaborative side to this. And by definition, that helps us with item 1 as well. Because if you're doing that part well, I think you're also probably creating the framework around collaborations like that that have to survive the institutional shakeups that are going on around us, almost by definition. And then there's probably an idea of within the jurisdictions of counties, there's probably a category, and this is something I've been thinking about for a little while, and I might write something on soon, about sort of what I'm calling institution proofing. So we've just said everything's subject to change, strategic authorities coming in, not sure what the shape of that will be, reorganization happening. So how do we establish growth level, sort of maybe even community level growth efforts that are designed to or capable of surviving the tectonic shifts of reorganization and of devolution? Maybe program boards that are rooted in communities that have their own footing and that you can simply lift and shift as an ongoing project from one institutional reality to the one that might exist in 5 or 6 years' time? I'm really interested in that as a question, and if anyone here is doing some thinking about that, I'd love to chat with you later. So all of this for us at Restate, and we've been doing this analysis for a little while now, comes down to sort of a series of propositions about the nature of the system that we want to see. And just like I asked you to do your sort of truth statements a few minutes ago, these are sort of our truth statements. And I put them to you in exactly that spirit, that we might be wrong about these might be pie in the sky, they are almost all possibly very difficult to achieve in some ways. But we like to do the work of doing sort of leading edge thinking about devolution and what the potential of a new system could be. And that's what it looks like for us. So I'm going to give you a set of propositions and then give you a sense of how we're starting to do work around that in the final slide. So number one for us is this idea that we've ended up somehow with a system of devolution that totally revolves around the idea that it is only local systems that need to do the changing. And I don't think there's anyone in this room who would find that appealing or right. Actually, for devolution to work, for greater and more empowered localities to function well, central government has to change too. It needs to change the way it thinks about local systems. It needs to change the way it talks to and with local systems. Now, if new mayoral relationships is part of that picture, then great. That's a big solve on the problem if we can get mayors everywhere. But I think we might find that it's not the only part of that picture. So I'm very interested in this proposition, that Whitehall, the conduct of Whitehall, the patterns of power and operation in Whitehall, that's a huge part of the devolution agenda. And it's not a box that's sealed off and marked things that local government must do to improve. I'm seeing some people nodding, but I think that's a kind of an important part of what we're doing in our program. Number two, devolution doesn't begin or end only with strategic authorities. No one doubts the importance of strategic authorities, but the idea of defining devolution, fundamentally defining devolution as a thing about strategic authorities. We establish them, we empower them, we lift some powers up, we push some powers down, it's over. That, I think, is a massive mistake. Rather, what we need to do is understand that devolution needs to be about the entire pattern of local institutions beyond and within the jurisdictions of these strategic authorities. And we're not even talking about the rest of the local state when we do that. We're not talking enough about the NHS. We're not talking enough even about blue light services, though we are talking more about that now. Number three, real autonomy is actually fiscal autonomy. Now, this came in third, I think, in the poll we did a few minutes ago, the idea of fiscal devolution. And there's plenty of people here who will think it carries with it just as much burden, just as much danger as it does opportunity. And I think that's true. But show me a mature system of local and regional government where that isn't true, where local government isn't equipped to take tough choices, win the argument with residents if it needs to incentivize certain outcomes by altering and innovating on its tax regime. Show me a system where this all works when that isn't true. You don't need to be a federal system to do that. You can do it tomorrow if you want to. There are examples all over the world, and we are a massive outlier in this regard. There are plenty of opportunities here, and if we take these three together, we're not just talking about strategic authorities with that power. We should be talking about other bits of the local systems too. Number four, and again, I think this is unlikely to be a controversial one, community mobilization is a non-optional part of the picture. It's not sort of a nice to have. I do think it's a little bit tacked on right now with the way central government thinks about its program of devolution and local government reform, but it's not optional. The reality is that there are swathes of our communities who feel detached from decision-making right now, who have lost trust in most, if not all, of the institutions that affect their lives in policy and political terms. If we are keen to help that, if we want to move the dial on that, there isn't a system that does it unless we achieve more efficacy for the average citizen. And for that, I think, and I hate to be the person to say it out loud, I'm sure others have, having a vote on a mayor at a county plus scale isn't necessarily going to move the dial. In fact, reorganization seems to carry with it as a corollary the idea that we need to take community-level activity much, much more seriously and have a reasonable policy that surrounds it too. Number 5, reorganization needs to be about greater agency. If I were to put my finger on what I think the big gap is in current reorganization policy emanating from central government, it's that, and please shout me down if I'm wrong about this, nobody really knows why it's happening. So a wry chuckle is what I get for that. Okay. Now, there might be some people here who see the potential. I see the potential. The truth is that policy wonky type think tanky people are always saying, yes, well, of course we should unitarize. We should have a much more reasonable, transparent system. And maybe we will achieve that at the end of quite a long process, quite a difficult process here. But the truth is that no one is bothering to make the case for a kind of reorganization that goes beyond the case for brute public service efficiencies. And as we just heard, in fact, in a session before this one in this room, those kinds of efficiencies are quite far down the road and in some places may not transpire. The case for reorganization can't just be about saving money or you're going to really struggle to get people on board with it. So we want to do lots of work on that. Number 6, places should be public service laboratories. This is relevant to growth because in the end, our public services are the main point of contact between the state and the public. And when we don't have enough autonomy and all of these other things to do really innovative stuff, to try new technologies, to engage with communities and involve them in the process more directly, to co-produce outcomes, to be more preventative in the way that we engage, then we're not going to get very far. And when I say laboratories, I don't mean everyone trying the same thing at the same time in every part of the country. I mean getting comfortable with the idea that one part of the country is going to try one thing, and another part of the country is going to try another thing, and one of them is going to do better than the other, partly because of choices and partly because of local conditions, and that's the only way to learn. We don't get to learn about what's going on unless we approach things in that way that's more comfortable with postcode diversity. I'm trying out postcode diversity. I think that's a new fix on postcode lottery, but not everyone will be on board with that. And so, final slide. These are the sort of the missions, if you like, that we're looking to pursue next when we look at our devolution policy. First of all, devolution by default. We put this forward a couple of years ago now. We were gratified to see a project by the same title emerge from central government, but it's not going to be real until every part of the system enjoys the access to devolution by default. It's not just about requesting powers, it's about saying, I need a really good reason not to devolve responsibility for X. Whole system devolution is the corollary to that. It's not just about strategic authorities, it's not just about regional and local government, it's about every part of how the state operates. And we need to have a much more blurred idea of what those different parts of the system are. We need more coterminosity, more connection, more integration, and lots more movement of power and resource through different parts of the systems in different places to different outcomes if necessary. Oh, no. Then there's fiscal autonomy, the idea that you do need to bring those fiscal capabilities within the ambit of our local institutions in order to avoid the kinds of things that happen when we're given responsibilities to deliver things, but not the resources to do so. When we're given responsibility to shape local economies, but without the firepower to change the taxation and other economic conditions within which economic development happens. And the last one, perhaps controversially for us, this fourth pillar, is this idea of a post-Quango state. We've been in a situation in this country now under the current Whitehall model, the Whitehall system, where it's understood that Whitehall itself is not directly capable of delivering every outcome that matters to us. And the solution for decades has been to create arm's-length bodies. Now, these are semi-autonomous or quasi-autonomous. They sit slightly outside the realm of accountability you'd expect other institutions to have, so they're a little bit anti-democratic at the best. The truth is, that you can look at a lot of the challenges facing our systems, not least our local systems in this country, and point to a failing ALB, a failing Quango, as part of the root of that. And so we think the next step in devolution may well be to turn around and say, okay, so we're busily creating a big pattern of more empowered local and regional entities across England. Those should be the default holders of some of those authorities. So months ago, we recommended, actually, you should abolish NHS England. It's just a great big Quango. And government went ahead and did that. Thank you, government. But what they've done since then is mostly talk about how they're going to now manage the NHS within the Department for Health and Social Care. If we had our way, the successor to NHS England would be regional and local authorities up and down the country. We also published a paper earlier this year making more or less the same argument about Homes England. And some of the people here may have pro or con views on that piece of work. But actually, we think this is a bit of a rich vein, that if you're going to win the argument with Whitehall about next level, next step devolution, part of it is going to be about this is how you move past the Quangocracy, beyond the Quango state. And that's what I have for you. We're going to do a little, quite quick plug for an event that's happening a week from now. I doubt anyone in this room will be able to attend it, but we do have 1 or 2 seats left if people want to come and hear more about what we're doing and from some of the other parts of the local state. Everyone here very welcome, as are your colleagues, but we do have just 2 or 3 tickets left, so I thought I'd put that up on the screen as well. And that's everything from us. Thanks, everyone.
Perfect time. In fact, it's on the hour.
everybody. Is the mic on? Can you hear me? Excellent. Great. Good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for coming to this, the final session of day one. A great event so far. Lovely to see so many people in the room. My name's Adele Gritton. I'm Chief Executive of Local Partnerships. For those of you who don't know about Local Partnerships, we are effectively an in-house capacity and capability consultancy owned by the public sector for the public sector. So we are owned by the LGA 50%, 45% His Majesty's Treasury, and 5% Welsh Government. And we only work for local authorities, combined authorities, central government departments, and anything to do with the public sector feeding into that set of systems. Really delighted to be chairing today's panel. I think it's fair to say that local government reorg has been the defining theme of the year. I think if we've all had £1 for every time we've had to use the word or had it spoken to us, we would all be very much retired right now and not sitting here today. For those of you who's been through the process, it's obviously been impossible to ignore the pace and scale of change. And obviously with Surrey's bid now submitted and clearly the government's decision to move forward with the 2 unitary proposal, we are seeing a new configuration of authorities designed to be of size, capable of achieving efficiencies, building capacity and withstanding financial shocks. In short, structures that are more likely to be sustainable in the long term. And many of you involved in the DPP, Devolution Priority Programme, have also submitted your proposals, and we await the government's response with great interest. Many preparing bids. Secretary of State will have them on desk, I think, in a matter of days. But today's focus is not on the content of those bids, it's not on where we've been, really it's on where and what next for implementation. So the transition from 2-tier to unitary is not simply a technical exercise, it's a very profound organisational shift. It requires clarity, resilience, leadership that protects both service delivery and the people who make it happen. So in this session, I think we'll probably just pull back the curtain a little bit. We're going to hear some reflections and lessons from those who already walked the path and from those who are navigating it now. And my hope is that by sharing experiences here openly, we can equip each other to manage transition with confidence, dignity, foresight, and clarity. But before I introduce the speakers, let me just say a little word about why Local Partnerships is chairing this session today. Firstly, we are supporting the LGA, I can see Joanna in the back there, with the delivery of its Local Government Reorganisation Toolkit. That's a practical resource designed to help councils plan and implement change. It's a set of systems, tools, processes, collateral that will bring together guidance on governance, finance, service design, workforce transition, community engagement, alongside many case studies and templates to support effective programme management. There's a lot on the LGA website already. There's a lot on our website, but there'll be a more cohesive, pulled together toolkit available and ready to share early in the new year. In addition, we've been working on something called the Surrey Pathfinder at the direction of MHCLG. That was supporting the 11 districts and boroughs with data aggregation to feed into central PMO as lessons learned from the Surrey process. And that experience has given us valuable learning into the data piece required as part of LGR. And we're also working directly with DEFRA at the moment with a series of workshops looking at combined authority, particularly in areas where there is LGR, to help them think about bigger picture strategic waste issues. So we're very much at the kind of heart of some of the decisions and some of the things that people are going through right now. So I'm delighted to be joined by 3 esteemed panellists. I think Tim Oliver needs no introduction, leader of Surrey County Council, previously a chair of CCN, and Tim is going to bring a member's perspective to today's discussion. Then Rachel, Chief Exec at Buckinghamshire Council. Rachel has led them through their successful reorganisation back in 2019, and she's going to share both the successes and some of the challenges from that journey. She was also instrumental in the Durham unitarisation, which went live in, I think, 2009. So lots we can learn from Rachel, even though many of you know and have seen from her LinkedIn post that she is leaving her position as Chief Exec in a few weeks to be joining Anchor, but still very much part of the public sector family. And last but not least, Nicole Wood, who is Chief Executive of Essex County Council. Essex is part of the DPP programme, with 15 separate authorities submitting different proposals currently under government consideration. So deep breaths, Nicole, and lots of things Nicole needs to be dealing with right now. So her perspective will be valuable into that complexity. So what I'd like to do, we've got a good sort of healthy number of minutes to have a session here today. I'm going to start by asking each of the panellists a couple of questions each about their journey, where they are. Then we'll have a bit of a discussion, three-way discussion, and then I want to allow a good 20-25 minutes for questions, thoughts, comments from the floor. But if I can turn to you first, Tim, obviously in the thick of it, if I can use that phrase. So since the recent announcement, what are you doing? How are you planning to ensure that there's continuity of service? What does it look like on the ground at the moment in Surrey?
So before I directly answer that question, just a little bit about where the last 12 months, I suppose, from I think the 16th of December when we all received letters inviting us to think about local government reorganisation. And then we submitted our business case, in the interim and then the final one. And then consultation last summer. There were two competing bids, one supported by the County Council and some of the district and boroughs for 2 unitaries, East and West Surrey, and the other supported by the remaining district and boroughs for 3 unitaries. That process in itself was quite challenging, I suspect, as all of you have found or will be finding. And it's probably the issue largely was the difference of view in terms of, from the district, some of the district and boroughs, in terms of what disaggregating the county services look like as opposed to aggregating their services. Anyway, we got to a point where the government very recently confirmed that we would have 2 unitaries. We are a very special county, not least, well, we are a very special county. As I've said many, the best county in the country. But we do, of course, have Woking in our midst. And that's been quite distorting in terms of I think the way in which the government have approached it. But they have managed to, or they have agreed to chip in 500 million as a small contribution towards the debt in Woking. And at the same time, they confirmed the 2 unitary thing, but then haven't confirmed the mayoralty or a date for the mayoral election. They've said that we should set up a combined authority, but not a mayor, and that's a conversation that is very active at the moment with the government. But what then happens is, what has happened is that there's a draft structural change order. So that is the piece of legislation that gets laid in Parliament, in our case next March, which brings into effect the elections for the 2 new shadow unitaries. But what they have asked for is that we set up informal joint committees, so one in the east and one in the west. And that is what we're negotiating at the moment. In fact, Terence Herbert, the chief executive, should really be up here because he's the one who's having to do all the heavy lifting. It's an odd process because up to this point, it's all been politically led, and now, within the next few weeks, effectively, we will hand over to the shadow joint committees, and Terence is leading the implementation team, and it's all about then the operational aspects of how you disaggregate the services and aggregate the others. So we're sort of in a slightly odd phase. Then all the formalities, everything comes into sort of being next March, and then we have the elections in May, and then the 2 shadow authorities are formed. But in the meantime, we have a council to run. There are 12 councils that remain sovereign bodies, and will do until vesting day, which in our case will be 1st April 2027. So the challenge for us is, how do you keep an eye and focus on the business as usual, whilst also then looking to create or effectively create the 2 new unitaries. And that's where I think, and I can't see him because the lights are so bright here, but if I could see him, the chief exec, then I think he would confirm that the only way we can deal with this is to have 2 separate teams. So an implementation team and a business as usual team, because realistically, if you've got the same person trying to do it both, they're going to get pulled probably more towards the implementation than towards the business as usual. So that's what we're doing at the moment, is getting those sort of teams set up, working through it. You know, can't deny that there's some politics in all of this. You know, the 12 councils have all different political makeups, you know, and so getting the agendas aligned and just simple things like getting data sharing working properly and so on is you know, is difficult. But anyway, we're sort of at that tipping point now where we're going to really be focusing on how we get the new team set up.
Great. And without going into too much operational detail, that new relationship, if you like, between Chief Exec and you as leader as part of the announcement, does that mean your week looks different? You've put different structures in place to have two-way conversations? The implementation team, are they existing staff or you're recruiting externally? What does that look like in the round?
Well, I'm expected to have nothing to do soon. I think the implementation team are going to be doing it all. Yeah. But I think I mean, it is, you know, and it will be, I suspect, it'd be interesting what Rachel's view is, but I think once the new unitaries are elected, it's going to be a really challenging year in terms of, you know, they are going to be wanting to be up and running and taking decisions as soon as possible. Of course, they can only make recommendations until the unitaries can't, you know, actually make any real decisions until vesting day. So, you know, I think we're definitely the week will change. You know, the focus will change. You know, it will be about making sure that all the decisions we take now as a council, you know, that we think about the impact that will have on the new unitaries, and obviously then, and one of the issues which we did ask the government for was to effectively impose at this stage, if you like, a Section 24 agreement. So, and Rachel will have the scars for that. So, you know, I think Section 24 controls the new contracts, you can enter into the size of the contracts and the length of them, and assets you can dispose of, because, you know, that really does need to be managed in a coordinated way. You know, that isn't to say that people will abuse it, but they haven't agreed to that, so we'll only get that as and when the formal order is laid. So.
Great, thank you. So segues nicely, Rachel, to pick up on some of the things that Tim has just said. What would you say, from your perspective, were some of those biggest challenges, Section 24 notwithstanding? You know, once you knew what you had to do, as it were, what kind of work, what didn't, what were the big frustrations and challenges along the way?
So I think one of the biggest challenges is managing the emotion that everybody brings to that whole debate. And that emotion, of course, is based on people being really proud of their legacy organisations, but it can get in the way of moving forward, either because people want to cling to what they've had before because they believe it's the best way, or depending on the context. And I do think that the context really matters in terms of the way you approach unitarisation. A feeling of, actually, you are trying to take over and you're trying to kind of like the Borg assimilate everybody into a particular way of working. And I think trying to position the future in a more positive way alongside people really either being angry or upset or grieving or still fighting for the thing they believe is quite challenging, I think, for everybody. I think in that sense, it's really important to see unitarisation as having very distinct phases. It's definitely marathon territory. It's worth it, but it's marathon territory. And I think it is worth thinking about what is the chunk that we need to focus on right now, and then what comes next. And I think Tim's point's really important, because who would invent a system where we haven't got enough money in the sector to start with, so this is definitely not a panacea for local government funding, definitely not. We've got a bigger policy agenda nationally than we've ever had for decades, probably. We have got to try and keep our eye on the money. We've got to do business as usual to the over 20 million people that are going to be impacted by unitarisation. And then we've also got this thing called disaggregation or aggregating organisations. And it's the same humans that are doing all that work. So I think that point that Tim was making about what we're doing in Surrey is we're going to have effectively an implementation team and a BAU team is right for Surrey, because what none of us can afford are for people to go under in the period of time between now and go live, because for some councils that is literally going to be years that they're going to be at this stuff.
We had a bit of a pre-call, didn't we, last Monday to discuss this, and we talked a lot about operating in the grey. This is very much about operating in the grey area. Are there any kind of practical things that you can talk about that you put in place to try and create some certainty from the ambiguity of having to operate in that kind of very complex spaghetti-like way?
So I think, it's a trite thing to say, but I think you've absolutely got to communicate with different stakeholder groups very, very, very regularly. And even if you're saying to people, actually, not much has changed since last week, last month, I think you've just got to keep talking to people about what's coming next, how they can get involved. As soon as you have certainty on different aspects of unitarisation, you need to give it to people. So, for example, if the truth is that once government have made the decision for your place, effectively everybody's just going to choop in, or there's going to be a disaggregation and they'll choop into the different entities, that's what people need to know. Because we're kind of sort of basic Maslow hierarchy of needs stuff. Am I going to be paid? Am I going to have a job? So there's an employee cohort of people that we need to give reassuring and straightforward messages to. There's also then different constituencies, aren't there? So you've got all your elected members, your town and parishes, members of the public. I think partners get more wobbly than you might imagine. And I think sometimes partners start to think about whether they should redraw their architecture to fit with what might or might not happen with unitarisation. So my sense is that councils also have a job in trying to hold other partners steady and keep everybody focused in on, actually, for the people of Surrey, Essex or Buckinghamshire, they still need to get these services and they still need to be able to rely on them.
It's all about the people, isn't it? And we often talk a lot about the phrase, people do things for people, not for organisations. I think now's the time to kind of really understand and leverage that within the sector. Thanks, Rachel. Nicole, how on earth are you preparing your organisation for multiple possible outcomes? Talk me through what that looks like for you right now.
So I'll give a very brief pen picture of what Essex is to those that don't know. And it's about as complicated as you can get. Maybe Hampshire can have a competition with us on this, but there's 15 authorities, 2 unitaries in that, 12 districts. One of the authorities is Thurrock, so that's in intervention 2, which brings an extra bit of your frisson, like Surrey. So it's a very special place. It's a very special place. And we also have 4 business cases in the system. And in those 4 business cases, there's 14 different permutations of unitary. So there's still a lot of ambiguity to hold, and also to make sure that we advocate for any outcome, right? Because those that we lead, the staff, the partners, we don't know what the outcome is going to be, and we need to make sure that they are ready to embrace whatever government decides. So I think that's really important. I'll talk a little bit about the mechanics, about what we've started to do, and of course we're not as advanced. We're definitely, I suppose, the future in the ghosts, aren't we? You're the past and the present. So we have corralled the chief executives together. We meet weekly, and we have built a programme. I'll be honest, it's still quite immature, but we built one with a series of work streams. All of them are co-sponsored by an upper and a lower tier chief executive to make sure that there's both perspectives coming into that. We also have things like joint comms strategy. We have a joint LGR Digi platform where we post all the documents on. We have not quite got to a joint implementation team, but we're starting to build some of that capacity. And certainly, and you may have this in your own authorities, we're really sweating where we've got professional groups. So where we've got professional groups like CFOs, contracts people, tech groups, we're making sure those groups are getting together and we really understand the value of those professional groups that work across all the authorities. They're like critical to this journey. But I just want to speak one last point because you mentioned behaviours. That's the mechanics. We're also working together on behaviours. Mm-hmm. So we've had some facilitation to bring the chief execs together and develop effectively a team charter, which I won't go into all the detail again, happy to share it, but a couple of fundamentals in there are things about how we deal with respecting each other and how we deal with difference and how we deal with conflict. So we've been starting those conversations because that's the cornerstone of it, right?
Mm-hmm. And as part of that, I guess, with 15 different chief execs with different styles, different backgrounds, how do you kind of leverage the collective strength or assign people to play to their sweet spots? Is there a sort of process that you went through to do that, or is that still very live and ongoing?
So all of the chief executives have nominated into having a leadership role on one key work stream. So, and they've essentially played to their strengths on that. Some of it is their professional background. Mm. I mean, I can't get away from the finance. I'm a finance person, and I don't want to.
So a lot of people are leaning into things that they are either passionate about or they have really strong professional networks on. So we've tried to leverage some of that.
Great. Tim, I think you mentioned this morning you've been talking to the department. I'm sure many of you are talking to MHCLG very frequently at the moment. What does that look like? Any tips, hints, things that you can share with the group about that working relationship at this point in time?
I think the key takeaway for me is that there is a new team now in place, so new Secretary of State, new ministers, and therefore a slightly different lens, I think, that they're looking at devolution and LGR through. Starting with the fact that there is a separate minister now for local government reorganisation, Alice McGovern, and a separate minister for devolution. And I think they are seeing them quite separately, which is different from when Jim McMahon held both roles. So, I think how that plays itself out over the next few weeks and months, we'll see. But I think the government, they started with a clear sort of ambition to create mayors across the whole of the country. I think they don't have the capacity, they would probably say, to deliver it at the pace that perhaps some people want to do. Obviously, you've got six authorities going forward in the DPP programme next year. And then we'll see how many more mayors sort of follow on behind that. But I think also there seems to be a much greater emphasis on local government reorganisation than there was with the previous team. So I think whether that's because there's a belief that there will be financial savings from that, or whether it's simplification of the system and having a sort of a sort of a structure that is for a mayor and a unitary across the whole country, and so on. So I think I think probably it's fair to say they're in sort of rethinking territory in some respects, and we'll see what comes out of that thinking.
Yeah. Is that consistent, Nicole, with your experience, obviously earlier on, and requiring sort of different sets of support or guidance? How is that sort of dialogue relationship unfolding with the department?
With the department. So obviously there's now much more order to that, and I think there's really good links, and you can just reach out to them, right? I tend to just keep it quite informal, reaching out if we've made really good progress on things. We've had some great recruitments lately, so I'm letting them know who they are. And I think there's also something about not distracting them with trivial matters, and making sure you really focus on the big issues, because you can, there's an awful lot that doesn't go right day to day, and I think it's really important to keep them focused on the big matters. Also keeping them really focused on the risks, because there's a great outcome through all of this. Talk about a place like Essex, you wouldn't design a system, would you, with 15 authorities? There's a great outcome, we're all bought into the outcome. But it is really hard and complicated, and I think there's just something about making sure that they're really sighted on some of those risks. And I'm going to reference one, because I just think it's really important. For us, we have vesting day 2028. We've still got to deliver £100 million before we get to 2028, and a massive transformation, different commissioning approaches. And I think just anchoring what we've still got to do in parallel to this immense and, very rewarding change that will come is very important, because we can't lose sight of, we've got to hand over great running authorities, all right?
Yeah.
So we do talk a lot about risk.
Okay, great.
And one of the things about MHCLG that I think is really welcome this time round is that they've got a kind of reference advisory group made up of the sector. Now, that is quite different from previous iterations of reorganisation. So a number of colleagues in this room are involved in that, including myself. That's a really important mechanism, I think, for the sector to be able to hold the mirror back up to MHCLG, having sight of some of the emerging thinking, to really kick the tyre so that we kind of end up with some better solutions and options than would otherwise have been the case. And I think that's really welcome.
We don't talk enough about perhaps the resident at this point in time, or the resident or businesses or local communities, and recognising different types of engagement required along the way, depending on where you are on the journey. But is there a different thinking, different approach to how you deal with your external stakeholders, your customers essentially, at this point in time, or is it kind of business as usual in terms of the thinking? Who wants to go? Anyone?
Well, I think I mean, interestingly, the consultation that the government ran over the summer for us was focused on our partners. I think there was about 5,000 or so responses. So there were some residents. It was a very resident unfriendly consultation, has to be said. You really had to have an understanding of LGR to kind of work your way through the questions. You know, and I think that it's a mix, isn't it? I mean, some residents are interested in it, some residents aren't. I mean, you know, I think a lot of our residents are pretty cynical about local government. But I think the bit that I focus on and am focused on is around the neighbourhood area committees, which is will be a requirement in the Act. And I think, you know, we all recognise as county councils that we are, you know, considered to be fairly remote but strategic authorities. You know, and district and boroughs believe that they're kind of more local to the same resident than we are. And I do think that's, I do struggle a bit with that argument because, you know, we have social workers going in and out of people's houses, people going to our libraries and so on. But I do recognise that you know, unitary councils are going to be have more of a strategic focus. So actually, we've started 4 pilots around the county. Some of those have town or parish councils, some of them don't, some of them are more urban, more rural, and so on. And I know that these sort of exist in other places, but that is the way I think that you will really get the resident engagement and voice. And we set them up to include representation from health, police, VCSE, you know, local government, business and so on. So really sort of 30 to 50,000 communities, probably built around either a grouping of parishes or villages or around a town. And I think that's what we really need to get right. You know, that is the way in which we can you know, address the kind of the issues that are pertinent to that type of community, rather than just simply trying to manage this from a kind of a, you know, slightly more remote position at a unitary level.
Great. Rachel, any reflections on your journey?
Yeah, so I think the model of community engagement at a more local level, again, is something that is for individual places to think through. There are lots of different models from councils that have unitarised some years ago that people can look at. Mm-hmm. I think the other issue is, you know, what is pragmatic? What do the public want to know right now about your journey? Well, they want to know if the bin's still going to be emptied. They need to know who to... Do you know what I mean? So do most people really care about this phase? Probably not, if we're honest. They'll want to know more further down the road, but I think the messaging needs to be really clear and simple for the public in this phase. The other issue, sadly, and we know this always happens, is there's a bit of internecine warfare amongst different tiers of local government during the process, and I think that must be deeply confusing and unsatisfactory for the public to see all that playing out when we're all paying more council tax and we're all getting less service as a consequence. I do think that the other group to think about, though, are communities of interest as well as the general community. So as you get more and more towards vesting day, particularly when you're seeing big changes in the structure of local government, if you are, for instance, a learning disabled adult or a looked after child who's part of a children in care council, what do you need that's different in terms of your communication, your engagement with the council that is different from the general public? So I think there's a segmentation issue for different constituencies the further you move towards go live.
Mm-hmm. And where you are, where it's a bit more complex at the moment?
Yeah, so I'll build on a couple of points because I think most of the points have already been made. But well, the first thing is you've got to build awareness. And when we surveyed our residents, only 1 in 2 were aware of LGR. So there's something about...
That many.
That's all right.
That's good.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. It should be. We'll try and get it higher though. So there's something about making sure that they're aware so they can engage with the process and the consultation. Obviously, for the DPP is imminent. I don't know if it's official yet. So imminent. But when we did survey our residents, they weren't that interested, believe it or not, in council boundaries. Mm-hmm. They were interested in getting good services, good value for money, their council tax bill. You know, if you ask them what was important to them. So that we've got to keep that at heart too. Just a couple of addendums, I'd say. I mean, I totally agree. You know, neighbourhood delivery committees, we call them, are an incredibly important part of the future model. but to make them sustainable and make sure they aren't something that are just, you know, the first thing to get cut when the money gets tight. It's really important we have sustainable authorities that are not just viable, but can truly and sustainably invest in that way of working. And, you know, other people have good proposals on the table too, but for the county business case, we proposed a large endowment fund from some of the proceeds of the efficiency from reorganisation. So I think that's just, it's got to be real, right? It's not going to happen through writing it in the business case. It's going to happen because you invest in the capacity, capability and funds to make it happen. And then finally, I'd just say, kind of thinking a bit more to the philosophy of the future and post-28, I think there's something quite exciting, isn't there, with creating new organisations about how you design something different into them. You know, and I would love to see more co-design of services, more participatory budgets. So there's something about how you create new ways of working that take you close to the resident.
Okay. Fantastic. I wanted to allow a good 25 minutes for questions, comments, thoughts from the floor. As ever, we've probably got a mic, so anyone like to go with a first question? We'll take a couple at a time. Gentleman down the front, thank you. There's a mic coming.
I'll wait for the mic then.
Yeah.
Thank you. So my name's Paul Marshall. I'm the leader for West Sussex. We're on one of the DPPs. On LGR, the bit that I'm really quite anxious about is when we get into council tax harmonisation, because I think that's when the residents are going to go, whoa, I did not know this. So currently in West Sussex, we have a variance of over 60% on Band D between that. And that council tax harmonisation is going to be pretty painful. What's your advice? Do we do it over 7 years? Do you bite the bullet?
Just an easy question there. Who wants to take that one?
Well, I can tell you what the 151's officers view will be is, yeah, harmonise in year one. You say you have seven years. I mean, I think actually that is an issue, but actually the bigger issue, I think, for a lot of us is going to be the funding review, the fair funding review, which will see, you know, a lot of councils worse off ultimately, but not necessarily on the formulas, as was mentioned earlier. The sort of the rurality and the Hope School transport formulas and so on are okay, but it is the council tax equalisation that is going to see money shifting around the country, and for a number of us that's going to be painful. I mean, I think at the end of the day, so you're going to have to drive efficiencies anyway. I mean, the council tax equalisation, I mean, you could equalise down. You don't have to equalise up. I mean, it's you know, the whole issue, the whole thing is around is, you know, it's how you manage your overall budget, isn't it? But you know.
So on council tax equalisation, obviously take my life in my hands because it's a deeply political decision. But of course, we all know that government assume that we've maxed out on council tax take when they do the spending power. So it's really important that people recognise that. And the other issue is people will be aware in their places is that there's a differential between which part of the county raises the most council tax and which part has the most need and therefore effectively spends the bulk of the public purse. So people will be doing those calculations and understanding it. MHCLG have changed the timeline now by which you have got to have equalised. It used to be a lesser period of time, but they've extended it this time. We went really quickly on equalisation in Buckinghamshire because A, we knew what we were facing into in terms of finances, and B, we thought that it was really difficult to explain why in a single administration you would have a differential council tax effectively receiving the same services. So that was the decision making, I think, politically that we went through. And had we not taken that decision, the cuts that we would now be making would have been even worse than the sort of difficult scenario that we're already facing.
Yeah. And the context of understanding that in 14, 15 permutations is probably mind-boggling, but yeah.
It is, but I've probably not much more to add on the equalisation piece, but I'll just add one opportunity, though, that I don't want to lose. There's many other policies around council tax, things like, you know, your council tax benefits, discounts, do you give discounts to care leavers, that sort of thing. And when you have very many authorities, that's very inconsistent, and there's actually a great opportunity. And you know, through both policy improvement and financial benefit, through harmonisation of policies and collection and ethical collection. So I think there is a real other side of this that is very positive and could give real benefit to residents.
Mm-hmm. Great. Next questions. Let's have a flurry of hands. Front here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Julian Brazil, leader, Devon County Council. So there seems to be a general consensus up there that LGR is a great idea and is going to deliver lots of benefits. Now, I live in a very, very rural area, and I wonder if you could give me some examples of where LGR has delivered this promised land that we're being told is on offer.
So I don't think LGR is a panacea. It's really important to be clear about that. The problems that we're all facing into today are still going to be around when you are 2 or 3 years into LGR. I do think it allows for much more strategic thinking and planning in an area, and it is more efficient. So it won't solve the woes of local government in terms of finances, but if I give you just a very small example, in Buckinghamshire pre-unitary, we used to spend £40,000 in the county council picking up the phone to tell people they'd rung the wrong council. Now, that is really not good for residents, and it is an inefficient waste of resource. And the join-up that you get, both in contractual terms, in shared effort, in simpler, I think is really important for the public. I think the mistake that some councils have made historically in unitarisation is it's all been about the money and efficiency. And whilst there's bound to be some efficiency, I do think there are simpler services for the public. I think the thing that councils will be doing now in terms of their business case is trying to bulletproof. So from a resident's perspective, what is going to be better for them as a consequence of unitarisation? And that will be different in different places. But the bottom line for all of us is we only exist to serve our public and our business. That's all we're here for. You know, we're not here to do anything other. So I think it's really important that people have got their own story and narrative, because it's a painful process, this. It's definitely worth it. You know, I've never met anybody that's gone through unitarisation who's said afterwards, I wish we'd never bothered. And we've got several members here now, just from Buckingham's perspective, who were part of the old world in the district landscape and are now part of a county unitary. Everybody will say it was the best ever thing, but it is so painful getting there.
Any other reflections? Yeah, I think it's fair to say it's certainly not easy, and I'm not sure we are giving the impression that it's all roses up here, but I think when you have to do something, it's probably best to try and approach it with the optimism and with the fairness that's required to serve the residents, to serve the public as best we can. Any other questions? There's one over there, thank you.
Hello, George Finch, leader of Warwickshire County Council. Now, look, I understand that parish and town councils are really important, but my fear is that we're getting rid of the district and boroughs, but we always say we're going to put more support and resources into parish and town councils. Are we not just going to create smaller districts and boroughs over the next 10 years by putting more resources into parish and town councils? Are we not just creating the same problem that we had back in the 70s? So we're just going to keep repeating and repeating LGR until we kind of run out of resources and give up. What are we going to do with the districts and boroughs? We're going to get rid of them, great, but then you're going to put more money and power into parish councils. It's the same thing over and over again.
So I'll start there then. So one of the issues, I guess, for anybody who's going through unitarisation is what you want town and parish councils to do. So I think places need to determine what is it that they can do better than us. Now, don't forget they can precept. So that's a really important point. So I live in Buckingham, and Buckingham have got really lovely flower baskets. And the reason they've got them is that they precept for them and other things. And that really matters to me as a resident, because when I wander around there, I'm really interested in how the place looks and feels. Now, the county unitary has got a role to play in that as well. And, you know, you'll do lots of regen and thinking and strategic planning for your places. But the town and parishes are much closer, aren't they, to their residents day to day. So whether it's we precept and we've got a little grit box, or we plant those flowers, or actually we do the parks and play equipment. So I think that they've got a really important role to play. I think the other thing for individual councils is, what, if anything, do you want to devolve to them? that you've done previously either as a county council or as a district council that you think that they are up for. They might do that as a federation or they might do that as single town and parish councils. But I think it's about deciding and determining what are the things that the unitary can do and do really well, and what things can the town and parishes do and do really well and cheaper and closer to people. And that's been my experience both in Buckinghamshire and also in Durham.
So just to be clear, I'm not advocating, I don't think the sector is advocating that that more money is put into town and parish councils. We need to remember they are distinct, distinct councils. They are not part of local government. They are not funded through local government. It is for the community to decide through a community governance review whether they want a town or parish council. So about a third of the country are parished. That is different from neighboured area committees. And the reason, the way we have set up those, the area committees, is as a coordinator for all of those other public services. The town and parish council simply deals with effectively local government issues. So there is a potential conflict between a town council and these neighbourhood area committees. But I mean, and residents, if they do vote for the establishment of a new council, they need to understand they will be paying a precept on top of their council tax. So I don't actually, personally, I haven't been advocating the creation of any more town and parish councils, but that is a decision for the district and boroughs, not for the county council. But I am advocating for a forum, a way of bringing together health, police, and local government and so on, to have a holistic view of the issues that matter to residents in that area, and to have the right people in the room that can actually do something about it. So I think there is a difference.
Right. Oh, lots of hands now. We'll go to the back first, or the third row from the back. Yes, thank you there. Oh, and go in the front first. Thanks. Go for it. You've got the mic, go for it.
Thanks very much. Richard Roberts from Hertfordshire. Was the leader and now in opposition. Two things. First reflection is, and the panel has mentioned this, the incredible enthusiasm of the government coming in to have mayors and have devolution of powers and funding, particularly around investment to get growth going. And that has subsided and been replaced by what we really need to do is break up local government and at the same time starve local government, because it is tremendously difficult dealing with that demand with the kind of fair funding reviews being mentioned. And Tim, picking up on your point about the rethink, at what point, if the government doesn't have the capacity and doesn't have the wherewithal to be able to deal with more than a few at a time, do you actually have a sensible conversation so that you end up hanging on to your staff and you maintain morale and you keep the services running, that you actually say, hang on, we need a pause here, and some of you aren't going to get through in 27, 28 or 29, and actually it's beyond that time. And that seems to me the really fair question to ask right now before further decisions are made. Thank you.
And that's exactly the feedback I gave to the Minister. Exactly that. There needs to be they need to call in all of the leaders from all 20 or 21 upper tier authorities and set out an individual timetable, because if they can't do it all, even by 2029, they need to be very clear for that, for the very reasons you set out, Richard. So I hope that the government will respond to that.
And I've also been saying exactly the same thing to the officials. It feels really important because there's matters of opportunity and actual cost everybody is expending on this process. And if the reality is we can't get it all over the line in the timescale we set out, which was always wildly ambitious, if we're honest, I think we need an honest grown-up conversation about that so that people can turn instead to all the work they need to do, whether it's saving, service improvement, whatever it is, because it seems to be a tall order to me to get all of these councils through in this Parliament.
Yeah. Any more questions at the back there? Thank you. Yeah.
There's a hand.
Okay, next.
Andrew Jarvis, Deputy Leader, Westmoreland Furness. In the previous session, I stressed how messy, difficult, time-consuming, distracting going through LGR is. We're now 2.5 years in. I just wanted to make a comment really on the council tax equalisation. I think that was something that at the start we had in our minds. Yes, it's a political thing to do, but it's actually a really easy, in many ways. It's something that's done on a spreadsheet by the Section 151 officer, and once the decision is made, it's implemented. There are many, many other difficult and controversial decisions to be made. You try harmonising different bin policies, where you've not only got different policies, but you may have outsourced, insourced, harmonising parking charges. I have to say, the flack we've had from trying to harmonise the taxi policy. And we had a series of meetings because the taxi drivers weren't agreed on what was the livery requirements. Those are the things which actually can take up huge amounts of time. And certainly when it comes to bins, and there are other services as well, I guess, which are in the same sort of category, those are the ones which can become very, very political, and it's a huge amount of officer time to do the work, albeit that there should be good savings from it in the end. But that's the things which residents, they quickly forget about the council tax, but they certainly are very aware of, you know, their bins changing.
Yeah, and I think we've got between us, haven't we, a lot of experience of understanding what that list of harmonisation looks like. And then again, it's for places to determine, isn't it? What is your rank order prioritisation? Because you can't do it all at once, as you and I know, because we've lived that dream. But you do have to do it, and you have to do it within a reasonable amount of time for all sorts of good and practical reasons.
Nicole, anything that you can add based on the sort of conversations you're having?
So obviously we're in much earlier days. I just want to kind of add to the list, so the importance of social care. You know, and you know, we're in a place where there's 3 social care policies, so that harmonisation is going to be quite a challenge, and we're acutely aware of that because, of course, we want to minimise the risk to the most vulnerable people, right? So social care is a really important part of it, and not to get too technical, and sorry, maybe better answering this than me, but getting things like the structural change order right are really important, therefore, to make sure the decision making is in the right place.
Again, it's about people, it's about compromise, it's about communication, isn't it? Getting those sequences right. Thank you. Yeah, over here, thanks.
Is that on? Yeah, okay. My name's Ian Cooper from Staffordshire. In this brave new world we've got with transition, in the county of Staffordshire we have Stoke-on-Trent, which is a huge city in comparison to the rest of the county. Its debts alone are over £1 billion, that we're going to have to absorb that on day one before we even start. So we're going to be absolutely hamstrung in this whole process. What can the government do? I see Woking's had £500 million thrown at them already. This is going to get replicated across the whole of the UK, isn't it? Towns and cities are saying, we're going to absorb some big debts from other places. What's the plan?
Tim, any observations on liability?
I think the government were pains to point out that the settlement for Surrey was a kind of one-off, and that other areas shouldn't expect to be bailed out. But I mean, we have 3 authorities actually in Surrey that collectively combined have debts of about £3.5 billion. So Woking's the most public one of those, and it's 2.2 billion. When they've sold down their assets, broadly speaking, it's expected there'll be about £1 billion left, of which the government have paid half of that now. I mean, I think it is. And we were very, very clear during the process with the government that we would not ever allow that debt to be spread across the rest of Surrey. That was simply, we were not going to have that, tolerate that, and we just kept on and on and on making that point, which is why I think perhaps eventually the government recognised it. But you're right. I mean, it's when you look at and we haven't got on to the high needs block and the deficits there that are sitting across the country. I don't know how the government are going to manage all this, because there doesn't seem to be the money to do it. But I think, just point of clarification there, there's obviously a difference between council tax harmonisation and council tax equalisation, which is where we're going to see money being shifted around within the system. But I don't know. I think the governments haven't declared anyway any kind of solution to your issue?
Yes, so I'll add, I mean, it's a great question, and because it's one of the things actually does worry me a lot. I mean, obviously, there are some areas that are quite indebted in Essex. We've got £5 billion collective debt. We're pretty highly indebted too. And the thing with debt, it's all right until it's not, right? I mean, I was finance commissioner at Thurrock, and on paper it looks fine. And then when you do all your revaluation, your assessment, and you have to crystallise the impairment and all the technical stuff on, I'm sure people don't want to hear it today, but MRP, you know, there's a lot of really complicated technical stuff that's going to be worked through. And the matter of fact is also the case for everyone going through unitarisation. There's a big backlog in audit, and that in itself will bring risk. The positive is, though, that's very negative, the positive, there's twofold. The truth already exists, right? So if there are problems with debt and problems with assets, all those things are real now. It just might be that this process crystallises them and forces us to tackle it sooner than we would have maybe erstwhile have done. And also, most of the debt is actually, of course, being already supported by people's revenue budget. So with the exception of places in crisis, of course. So it's not as though it's all unfunded. But is it a risk? Does it need a lot of careful due diligence and attention? Absolutely. And I'd say it's a priority for any area starting in this process.
Can I just add that point about being covered by the revenue is really critical, because if any of the councils take their eye off their savings ball, that is a massive problem for the new council. And, you know, that happened to, I mean, it happens in pretty much every unitarisation, but, you know, we can't afford as a sector to take our eye off that ball.
Yeah. And sorry, I should have added one thing on the not taking an eye off the ball. I'll go back again. Vesting day is 2028. We have to be really careful that as a sector we don't make things worse on borrowing through behaviours or loss of control between now and then. So I think that bit, you know, there's a phrase, isn't there, it's hackneyed, but like transparency is a really helpful disinfectant before you get even into things like Section 24s and formal control. I think it's really important that the systems working together on reorganisation are really mindful about making large new decisions that will leave even worse legacy debt positions for their new organisations. I mean, we want all the new unitaries to thrive, right, and have a good inheritance.
There's a phrase, isn't there? Change is hard at first, messy in the middle, and gorgeous at the end. We've got 4 minutes left. Can we end with some positives about what gorgeous at the end looks like, and any advice, tips, practical thoughts for this group here? So who wants to go with a gorgeous tip to end us on a gorgeous high?
So I think when I think about the Buckinghamshire journey, we are really, really proud of where we've got to in terms of things like our staff morale and engagement scores, which are really high, our service quality, always more to do for all of us in that regard, our financial stability, tough though it is, and the ability to harness the creativity of a wider group of people in pursuit of the right thing for our residents and businesses. So, you know, we are now 5 years in, we've got a fantastic economic growth strategy spearheaded by the leader of the council and the growth board. Our partnerships are incredibly solid. Our staff are really, really proud to work for us. We've standardised our terms and conditions. We've got single versions of the truth on policies and operating models. So it feels like it is absolutely possible to make significant inroads into some of the wicked issues that we all face with unitarisation. But the getting there, as I said earlier, is painful.
Great, thank you. Any other final words of wisdom before we draw this?
Do you want to go first?
So I'll keep it really short. So there's something about, obviously I've not been through it. So there's a little bit about the shoulders of giants who've been through it and keep learning the lessons. And sometimes we can get a bit trapped, can't we, in all the things that didn't work as opposed to really focusing on the things that also do work. And I think that's a very important thing to push to staff as well, to share some of the stories and examples of things to give people a sense of hope. The second thing I'd say is that there's also things that are just unknown, right? Like, who knows where we'll be in 2028? And I think there's a really great opportunity as a catalyst for reform, you know, what comes out with the new councils to create something very different.
Mm-hmm. Great. Tim, final words?
Yeah, I mean, I was reflecting on this. It's an oddity for Surrey, because Surrey's county council is being split into two, only then to create a combined authority of two unitaries. So the logic of it doesn't seem very sensible. And in answer to your question, I'll come back in 5 years and tell you what the positives have been around this. But I think what needs to happen during this process is not just to change the structure, but to change the culture, both within national government and local government. I mean, I think we all really struggle with the lack of joined-up thinking at a national level. You know, DFE doesn't really speak to MHCLG or to DHSC and so on. And we really, you know, we in local government and the health system absolutely need to be focusing on investment in preventative activity and early intervention, all the stuff that we've been talking about today. But the culture needs to change. And you know, from a resident's perspective, it will be a simpler system, as Rachel has said. You know, there'll be one council and no sort of finger pointing to other people. So I mean, I hope that we use this as a real opportunity to look at ways in which we can do things better and more effectively. You know, not just from a financial perspective, but actually how do we improve the residents' experience? And I think there is absolutely that opportunity to do that, but we do need also you know, real clarity from government, all governments, on kind of where they're going, because you know there is so many things that have been thrown up in the air, and it doesn't help when you see a change in a ministerial team in terms of a change of direction. But you know, I think we have to hold on to the positives here, and you know, and live through it.
I think there's a reason Peter Drucker said all those books, culture does indeed eat strategy for breakfast, and I think we're all living and breathing that at the moment in everything that we do. To finish bang on time, I won't leave any concluding remarks. I think the panel have more than spoken eloquently about the challenges, the pitfalls, but also the opportunities. So please thank the panel for their fantastic contributions. And I think that's the end of day one, unless any...
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. This concludes today's plenary sessions. Please make your way to your group meetings. For locations, please see the screen or your conference app. We look forward to welcoming you to the reception at 7 p.m. and back in this room promptly for 8 p.m. and CCN's annual dinner.
Annual dinner. Hey, well done. Well done.